Here with John Ramdeen and Robin Black to chat about a lot of news today, a lot of different elements of mixed martial arts outside of the cage that could have big implications. We can start off with the announcement via press release of the formation of the Professional Fighters Association, and they got a lot of endorsements from people, including Don Fear, who heads the NHL Players Association, and it features Lucas Middlebrook, who's Nick Diaz's lawyer, and others as well. Do you think this is something viable? Because now we are at least seeing a structure in place, and you've got some muscle now attached to it of people that have a history in this.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it's still a long ways away, but I mean, this is something that's been talked about for years and years and years, and you didn't see any type of movement. Now you're seeing that. So, yeah.
Fighters are being a lot more outspoken now. Since that sale, and you compound that with, I feel the Reebok deal has really added to it. You don't see fighters as hesitant as they were prior to speaking out about pay issues, but again, it's getting all of these UFC fighters on board. And that's also interesting to note. In all the language of this, they're stating UFC and putting a union, an association together of UFC fighters. I don't know how this impacts non-UFC fighters, if at all.
It's interesting. For any way that you can get the fighters to get paid more, everybody's going to be in favor of that.
Not everybody.
Not everybody.
Not everybody. The people who paid them? I mean, I'd like to get paid more. You guys would, our camera people would. Everybody at home, everybody would like to get paid more, and that includes people who go fight each other in the cage. My first question is, who are these people? Like, what is their motives? So I'd like that question answered, because there are others. There are fighter collectives that are trying to do something. These people come along, and they have a very calculated plan to sort of release it, to get us and people like us talking about it, to have there's an official sounding flavor to the way they put this out. Is it official? Who are they? Where did they come from? What's in it for them? So that's my question, because we have even a former Canadian champion who's actively trying to start an organization and a union. There are other people doing it. So this one released in this flavor, in this presentation, saying we're the official one, we're the official thing. But who are they? We don't know.
Well, I think you look at the people involved here, at least, I mean, people like Jeff Boris, who has been a longtime agent representing a lot of baseball players. I think it needs this structure. You need these kinds of people to be putting this together, because God bless all the fighters out there. They will talk about all of this. Zero action. They never are going to get to that next step alone.
Well, what's in it for the people doing this is my question. Is it a salary? Is it some percentage that their company would get from I just want to know who they are. Because when you've got fighters that are actively trying to start something, those fighters could bring in some experts and then have it in the hands of the fighters. Because if the issue is somebody is paying somebody not enough, well, don't worry, we'll take care of that. Who are you? Who are you, and what's in it for you?
Unless it's you and I have seen, we've all seen, mixed martial arts has been growing, and you have friends that you go to a party and you're introduced to other people, and that's what happens. Like, oh, I like these MMA guys. I thought they were something that they aren't. They're a lot smarter than they are. They just don't have representation. There's no history of the sport. Hey, I want to get involved and try to help these guys. We've seen that. That's not something foreign.
And that doesn't mean there's something. I'm just curious if the issue is a whole bunch of people who are not you guys, are not fighters, are somehow infringing on your ability to make money. Don't worry, we'll take care of that. Who are you? You may be other people with that motive. So that's my question. If you get a bunch of fighters and the fighters are actively doing it, the Ronan, Carlos Newton, he's been actively trying to do this. Why couldn't Carlos and his people hire the people or bring in the minds that they need? Because I don't know who these people are, and I don't know what their motives are. Now, having said that, and it's presented very, very carefully and orchestratedly to feel like it's official. It's just a bunch of people trying to start something. Why are they trying to start it? Those are my questions.
And what names the active UFC fighters are willing to attach themselves to this? I mean, you hear a name like Lucas Middlebrook, you think the Diaz brothers would likely be on board with something like this, but that also is something of importance. If you can't get the upper echelon of UFC fighters to back this, you're not really holding the UFC's feet to the fire in all of this. And I think the goal eventually is to be able to form this association and recognize them that they are due their collective bargaining process, which does not exist at the moment. So a lot of theoreticals. Today, this is a press release. What is it 6 months from now? That becomes a very intriguing question. Let's move on, because George St Pierre, he did an interview with BloodyElbow.com. He is doubling down on the fact he is coming back and kind of calling out Dana White's comments that he said on this network about he doesn't believe George is ever coming back. He's had his last fight, and George is saying, I think that's a negotiating ploy because I'm not going to fight for peanuts. All these fighters talk about fighter pay, and I'm not going to just sign for what is below my worth. He also threw out an interesting piece of information that the Michael Bisping fight was on the table for Toronto in December, which was hardly a well-kept secret that the UFC is planning a card for Toronto, I believe the second weekend of December. But that is off the table now with Bisping fighting Dan Henderson. But George is also entering into the testing pool for USADA. Even though he never retired, I don't think he has to do this 4 months, but he's volunteering to do it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's one thing George has been vocal about during his time in the UFC, that needs stricter testing, and he's got to be subject to it as well. If you're going to point the fingers at people, you want a clean sport, you got to jump into the pool as well. I think this is a great thing. I mean, I wouldn't close the door on Michael Bisping. It's just right now they couldn't get it done because of the whole Reebok deal. But now, as you pointed out, the UFC's been sold. I would not be surprised to see some renegotiating happen, because when you look at stars in the UFC, you have Brock Lesnar, you have Conor McGregor, you have Ronda Rousey, and somewhere in there, one of the big draws is George St Pierre, and you have him come back to challenge Michael Bisping for the 185-pound championship. Woodley, I'm sure Woodley, but I think Tyron Woodley needs George St Pierre more than George St Pierre needs Tyron Woodley.
That's a great point. Whereas Michael Bisping, you need two guys in the fights.
Yeah.
Why are we so pumped about Conor versus Diaz? The rematch, the first fight was fascinating, but these two characters are fascinating. That's part of the gig, and Michael Bisping could do that. Mike is a true star in his own right, because you can like him, and many hate him, and that's a powerful thing.
Yeah, and when you also look at the fact that, I mean, they're eyeing him for whether it's a Toronto card, whether it's something else, I mean, he could really reinvigorate this Canadian market. I mean, it's been a different landscape since he's left. I think we can all attest to that fact. And George coming back, this is a guy who understands the leverage on his side and is not afraid to use it. And I think we're seeing that tactic being used publicly by the UFC vis-a-vis Dana White. And George is not going to be sucked into this with an ego thing and sign for less than he's worth. So it's an interesting battle that the two are having.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not just George St Pierre. There's a couple other stars. Nick Diaz just had an interview as well where he's like, I actually do not need to ever fight again. Because I don't even talk about contenders, I don't talk about stars, because as soon as I mention somebody's name, everybody talks about it because I'm the star. If the UFC wants me to fight, if the fans want me to fight, offer me a big fight, but I don't need to get back in the cage. But if I'm going to get inside of the cage, I need to be compensated, because like Rory McDonald, he understands his worth. That's why he's testing the free agency waters. George St Pierre is the same thing, and Nick Diaz. In a landscape where there are a lot of stars that are fading away or retiring from the sport, the UFC needs them. George St Pierre certainly knows that.
You know, it's a tricky thing sometimes if you say, oh, I won't do something because they can tell you like it, right? Like if we do commentary, sometimes people will say, well, we can't pay. Oh, we really love doing it. You know, they can detect that. You believe Nick Diaz.
Yeah.
You believe him.
Yeah,
Nick Diaz fought plenty of fights in his life. Nick Diaz is a lifelong martial artist, whether he's going to do it in a cage or he's just going to do martial arts because he loves it. And you believe Nick Diaz that he's only going to come back for the right fight and the right money.
Last topic, Cris Cyborg Justino and her team, they've just put out a trailer where they were following her behind the scenes of UFC 198 and her fight with Leslie Smith. And the part everyone is looking at is the weight cut she went through, and just seeing this woman who looked to be on the verge of death here, making 140 pounds, much less 135 that we've all been discussing as a possible destination for her. That's what's getting the focus of this. I think seeing this, it really does show you where she's at right now. But this has been a topic we've discussed for a long time now. Robin, you've put it. If Cyborg really wanted to make 135, it's not something you do in a month. It's something that you change your entire lifestyle around for.
She's a star, and we're always interested in talking about things around the fight. And she's one of those people. But you want to get people all worked up on the Underground or any one of these sites, you have this conversation. And I'm always like, why does that get everyone going? Why is there so much debate? And it's because people don't fully understand the conversation. Can she cut weight to 135? What they don't get is that weight cutting and weight loss are two fully different things. Weight cutting was developed by wrestlers to have the ability to dehydrate yourself down to a much lower weight. Can a 170-pound muscular person dehydrate down to 135 pounds? No, they cannot, and she cannot either. But could she lose the weight? Weight loss, reduce calories in, increase calories out, and every person in this room and every person watching at home, if you reduce calories in and increase calories out, you will lose weight. And somebody sent me a message and they're like, after seeing that, you really still think she could lose the weight if she ran and ate less? Yeah.
Yeah, obviously not in a week she's getting down to 135.
That's the point, is make her a smaller person so that she will cut less weight. Now, when that conversation begins, people are like, well, then she'll lose muscle. Of course she will, because athletes who fight at 135 pounds have less muscle. So if you want to achieve 135 pounds, you execute some weight loss to get down to a smaller sized human being, and then you do a normal weight cut. This is a very achievable thing, and everybody in the world could achieve it. Every single person can lose 10 or 15 pounds by reducing calories in and increasing calories out. In fact, it'll take 7 very large meals a day for her just to maintain that muscle.
Yeah, right.
She will lose it if she doesn't eat enough. So this is an achievable goal. Of course she'll lose a bit of muscle. Of course she won't be a 145-pound fighter fighting 135-pounders, but you could do it.
Yeah, I think we don't even have to worry about the weight. I think after what people saw in her UFC debut, she's already signed to headline another show. You're going to showcase her doing what Cyborg does, and that is destroying other females. And they'll create their own weight class. They have a star, like I pointed out, just like it was with Ronda in the early days. Nobody cared that it was Liz Carmouche or that it was Alexis Davis or any of these girls. They were looking to see Ronda Rousey throw somebody through the air and eventually get the arm lock. That's what people were paying to see. Just like when it comes to Cyborg, they want to see this scary beast tear across the cage and annihilate somebody so people can cheer and say, oh my God, did you see what that girl did? That is really what the UFC should be selling.
Yes, and I want to see that as much as the next person. I also want this lady to do exactly what she wants and fight if she wants to lose the weight, but the destination of losing the weight, you get to fight Ronda, Misha, Holly, all these big names. You can do that by first weight loss and then a smaller weight cut.
But for now, it's Lisa Landsberg coming up on September the 24th for Cyborg. That wraps it up for us, but be sure to check our special on Nate Diaz, I'm Not Surprised, hosted by John Randine, taking a look at the UFC career of Nate Diaz.